Paul from Saul was in his kind of former life, if you will. This was not a good character. He was a persecutor of Christians. He did everything he could to oppress people of faith. He hated on them. He was angry to them. He was cruel to them. He took part in any type of activity that would basically squash Christianity. Sound kind of familiar to some of the stuff that we have today? We have somebody that is really not a very good person. Paul, and this is after his conversion, is an apostle. An apostle is kind of a big word. I don't even see that my girls aren't really paying attention. Apostle, for you young people, means somebody in ministry that isn't in a church. So an apostle is somebody that went out to somewhere else in the world to spread a good news message. So Paul is an apostle. His job is to go out from wherever it is that his home is. And he's supposed to go out and spread the good news. And he does this after his conversion. And what happens is he is on a road. He is blinded by a light. And he can't see for 3 days. God restores Saul's sight, and at that point he realizes how wrong he has been. He realizes that there is not only hope and light and love in God, but that he needs to spread this good news and this message around the world. There's not a lot known about Paul. He was not one of the original 12 disciples. So he becomes a follower of Christ, but he wasn't one of the original 12. It's believed that he was well educated based on the region that he grew up in. So he's a pretty smart guy. He realizes that he's made some mistakes. So he goes out and becomes this apostle, and he starts new churches. That's basically what his job is, starting new churches. And this is where this letter comes in. He's writing to a church in a place called Corinth. And this is a really, really messed up church. Surprise, surprise again. Does it sound today like some of the church scandals we have to have a messed up church where there's bad stuff going on? Because it's what's happening in Corinth. And Paul is proof that our past decisions don't dictate our future. And this, if you'll notice, is from 2 Corinthians. So Paul has already written one letter to the church of Corinth telling them basically, this is how you're supposed to handle the stuff you're dealing with. Here's my advice, here's my guidance to you. So go to these people that are causing problems and essentially tell them to knock it off. Well, that kind of works, but not really. So there's still some people that are struggling, and questions start to come about from the church at Corinth, not from everybody, but from some people, and they start asking, well, who exactly is this cat named Paul? Why does he have the right to tell us anything, really? So Paul's second letter becomes him kind of defending his authority to give the church advice. And that's where we approach our scripture today. And Paul's writing to this church, and he says, put no stumbling block in anyone's path, so that our ministry will not be discredited. Rather, as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way, in great endurance, in trouble, in hardship, and distress, in beatings, in imprisonments, and in riots. And he's specifically touching on these things because this is after the time that Jesus has been crucified, and the world is still not very friendly to Christians. So there is a fear about being people of faith that you might be indeed imprisoned, you might be beat, there might be riots in the message that you're trying to spread. So Paul is trying to address this church and saying, we're going to have this stuff, but have endurance. In hard work, sleepless nights, in hunger, in purity, understanding, patience, and kindness. In the Holy Spirit and in sincere love. In truthful speech and in the power of God, with weapons of righteousness in the right hand and in the left, to the glory and dishonor, bad reports and good reports. Genuine, yet regarded as impostors. What he's talking about there is, don't be surprised when you try to bring the good news of God and of Jesus' love for people into a place and they think that you're full of malarkey. I don't know, whatever word you want to use. He's saying don't be surprised when people doubt your message and think that you're false. Known, yet regarded as unknown, dying, and yet we live on. Beaten and not yet killed, sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, poor, yet making many rich. There's a text in the Bible that says the last will be first and the first will be last. So you kind of find Paul, knowing some of this history, he kind of weaves some of these older messages in and the messages of Jesus that have come before. And he's kind of referencing that here. That in order to be truly rich, you have to be willing to give much away. Yet making many rich, having nothing, and yet possessing everything. We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and opened wide our hearts to you. So he was writing to this church at Corinth. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what was going on in the church at Corinth. There was a division in the church, so people kind of had a theological divide to begin with. Some people believed certain things, and some people were adhering to Paul's advice and the teachings of Christ. Other people were not. They were clinging to values and things that were not of Jesus. There were cheating spouses. So you had husbands and wives that were not being faithful to each other in the church, actually having relations with other people in the church. There was immoral issues. The church at Corinth, they had some money trouble. It's just pretty much everything that you could think of being not church was what they were doing. It's everything that you wouldn't want to find in church was going on at the church in Corinth. And we think it's tough in our churches today trying to decide on chair cover. Can you imagine having to try to talk to your brothers and sisters in Christ about having affairs, about stealing money? Okay, it doesn't make picking choir robes or picking chair colors seem all that difficult now. Because they didn't have that kind of stuff. They had deeper decisions and issues to tend to. I don't know if I've told this story before, and it doesn't relate to the church at Corinth, so I want to tell you there is a break. I'm not trying to tie the church at Corinth together with this story. It's been 3 years, maybe, honey? I think it's been about 3 years. I was paged to the hospital in reference to a motor vehicle accident in which a 2-year-old boy was ejected in his car seat. Babysitter was driving the kids around. She wasn't reckless. All the kids were strapped in, thought the car seats were secured correctly. One 2-year-old, and he was a twin. His car seat was not in place or secured like it should have been. So their van, she took a turn and just didn't navigate the turn, the van rolls. Everybody's okay, except this one little boy who was ejected in his car seat, remained in his car seat through the entire turbulence of the wreck and even the aftermath, and he ended up in his car seat on the road. Call 911, ambulance gets there, fire departments get there, they transport this little boy to the hospital. And they think, I don't know if he's going to make it. So they called me and said, this is pretty bad. Can you come to the hospital and sit with the family? I'm sitting in the family, and you talk about being torn. This mother and father have their babysitter who's okay. They had 2 other kids in the car who are fine. So on one hand, there's this giant sigh of relief that 2 of their 3 children are okay. And just mere feet away, doctors are working trying to save a 2-year-old. So I don't know what else would rip you in half as a parent other than a situation like that. The doctors are bouncing back and forth between the family and I, and they keep telling us, we think we got him stable enough, we're going to try to put him on a pediatric plane to Greeley or Denver, where he needs some specialized care. 10 minutes later, the doctors would come back in and say, no, things have changed, we don't think he's going to be able to fly, we're not sure if he's going to make it. This exchange of information happens about 4 times when I'm sitting with the family. About the 5th time, the doctor comes back in and says, we don't have any other choice. We have to do surgery here. So parents can naturally say, you know, what else can we do? So I'm praying with the family, and they take the little boy back into surgery. in the midst of surgery, they find out that he has way, way more severe internal injuries than they ever thought. And he passes away on the operating table. The parents are torn anyway with the situation, and then they've also been on this roller coaster of send him, not send him, send him, not send him, better, not better. So I went back with the parents, and we gathered everybody out that helped with this surgery. It's multiple doctors, there's nurses, there's just general hospital staff and the parents, and we gathered around this operating room, and I prayed for this little boy who just passed away. And there's not a dry eye in the room. And when the prayer concludes, the parents personally took time to thank every doctor and nurse that they saw. If I was in their shoes, I don't know if I'd be able to stand up or even feel like I could breathe. And here are these parents saying thanks in the midst of their grief. And I started with that story because our title today is, Are We Validated in Hardship? As bad as the stuff that was going on at the church in Corinth was, I can't think, as a parent, or even not as a parent, but somebody that has young people in their lives, who teaches, or who has nieces or nephews, I can't think of a more difficult position to be in than this family that I sat with about 3 years ago. I think that is about the very epitome of hardship. And I know that Pastor Lou would validate this. Lou, you and I both have sat with so many families that ask the question of why. In the midst of hardship, they just simply ask why. Why are we here? Or how did this happen? Why does this happen? It's a very empty feeling to be able, or to not be able to answer that question. We can make up answers to hardship. We can fabricate about whatever we want. But if you've just lost a child, I don't think there's a single explanation in the world that would feel like it was enough. And as I was getting the sermon ready, it dawned on me, why do I think that I deserve answers? I don't know if it's because people ask them of me, but I did realize that maybe I don't deserve to know the why. Maybe the why for all of us and a lot of these things is bigger than we can get our heads around. The evil, the chaos, the accidents. Why Paul was uniquely suited to write about this was because he participated in it. He hated on Christians. He tried to have them killed. He may have participated in some of the killings. I mean, he was very uniquely suited to talk about hardships and persecution and chaos and violence. And, you know, it's been active. This kind of stuff has been active ever since humans have been on this earth. I don't think we've had a day in history where we haven't had some kind of stuff go bad in humankind somewhere around the world. I mean, how many people in the world? 6, 7 billion maybe, or may even undershoot that figure, I don't know. We've got all this stuff that goes on worldwide all the time. And you want to know why? It's because it's our nature as humans to be destructive. That's why we need God. It's not God's nature to be destructive. It's ours. So the only way that love shines through, the only way that grace shines through, the only way that parents are able to say thank you as they have just been told that their 2-year-old has died on the operating table is because of something bigger than themselves. This is humanity's paradox, too. I get a lot of stuff, I don't have my pager on me, but my pager with the fire department, we get all kinds of crazy calls come through that thing. There was a call one time, somebody driving down Main Street in big old Sterling, Colorado. Okay, Main Street takes you 5 minutes to get from one end to the other. Stopping to help somebody wouldn't be a big deal. A 911 call comes in, and the dispatcher reports it as, we have a deceased male in front of McDonald's. He's laying face down in the grass. So immediately, the ambulance and the fire truck, they go zooming the 2 minutes to McDonald's. They get to McDonald's and find out it's a city worker, face down in the grass because he's adjusting the sprinkler valve that's down far enough that it takes him on the grass, gets up basically to his shoulder to reach this valve. And it's kind of a funny story, but this is the paradox of humanity. Why wouldn't you stop? You think somebody's dead in front of McDonald's, I sure would think people would pull over. I mean, we don't have a commute like Denver. It's not like if you get off, you may not ever be able to merge back in. People, and this is where humans, this is our paradox, because we love destruction and chaos. Maybe not everybody, but humanity as a whole loves all this kind of chaos. It's interesting. I call it the gossip girl syndrome. We love the bad news. Humans love the bad news. That's why those stories and those movies sell. That's why the news, when they report from natural disaster areas or those kind of things, that's why they have some of their highest ratings, because people love to turn in to the crap, or tune into the crap. That's basically the best way I can put it. They want to hear the bad stuff. But a very small percentage actually wants to take the time to do anything about it. And I'm not saying that nobody does, but there's a lot bigger percentage of people that like to just know the bad stuff and gossip about it, like the church at Corinth, who's cheating on who, what happened in that car accident, I saw a dead guy in front of McDonald's. This is the kind of stuff we love to be gossip girls about. The reason that more people don't help, it makes us uncomfortable. If you were to really get to know somebody in their heart, to find out the things that cause them pain, to find out the things that they struggle with, that's an uncomfortable feeling. Because when people make themselves vulnerable to you, when they open up and start talking, we are speechless in a lot of situations. We don't know what to say to help them feel better. We've got a meeting we've got to get to. We've got something else that we've got to do. So our questions of how are you, or those kind of things, are just handed out in passing. And it's nothing new. If you would read the Bible from beginning to end, this would be a great soap opera. Have you ever thought about that? I'm just going to highlight some of the things about kind of like the chaos and the tragedy that we've had in the Bible since the beginning of time. There were brothers named Cain and Abel. Murdered. Brother murders his brother. Imagine dealing with that as parents. There's a king named David. He had an affair with one of his friend's wives. So then he sends his friend off to war, basically so that his friend won't find out about his affair. Moses took the life of somebody when he was a young person. Abraham, another prominent figure in the Bible, he lied about his wife Sarah actually being his wife. He allowed another man to sleep with his wife because he thought it would keep them alive, and it did. So, very interesting soap opera. Natural disaster. Probably the greatest natural disaster that's ever happened was the flood, when the earth was flooded. How many of you, I'm sure everybody's going to raise their hand, love your in-laws, right? In-laws are great, aren't they? Wouldn't it be an interesting soap opera to put on an ark for 40 days with your in-laws? Think about that one. You're on a boat 40 days with your in-laws. I think there's probably a little tension and chaos there. Even the people that followed Jesus, the disciples, when he was killed, denied their affiliation for a time with their teacher, with their master, with the man that they looked up to so much of their life. They denied that they followed him. And of course we have Jesus being killed and crucified on the cross. These are some of the highlights of the Bible. We have these stories, and I think that we have them, and God, I think, wants to illustrate for us the need for Him. That's why we need Him in our lives, because if we didn't have God, our human history would just be littered with these type of events, never any good news in between. I think the text application for us is this. We still have this kind of stuff going on today. We hear about the Charleston, South Carolina incident. We have friends and family that deal with addiction. We have loved ones that deal with divorce. Children get bullied in school to the point of taking their own lives. We have Christians being murdered around the world. We lose loved ones in accidents. We lose loved ones to things like cancer and disease, things that seem to be incurable. And here's where church needs to come in. If we are not validating each other as church, we are not being church right. What I mean by that is this. We can't ignore the reality that this kind of stuff happens. That the chaos, that the tragedy, the hatred, that the violence, the things that make us so uncomfortable that we don't really want to take time and sit down with people exists. We have it in our own lives and our own families even as much as we want to bury it down. Everybody has that brother or that sister or that whatever in their family that it's kind of like we don't talk about that section of the family. Or you might have friends that we don't really talk about my friendship with that person because their stuff makes us uncomfortable. Those things are in our lives. Maybe there's even stuff in your own life that you try to press down. If you can't find a place like church where people say it's okay, you've been dealing with it for so long, I know it's broken you down. I've had stuff in my life that's broken me down, and brother or sister, we've had it since the beginning of time that has been breaking people down. If we are not validating the reality that that goes on in a place like church, we are not being church right. Church is not a place where we should come and pretend like everything is great, where nothing ever happens. It should be a place where we can be real with each other, and then together we can really encounter God. That's the point of breakthrough. We wanted a worship gathering that kind of stripped away all the stuff that maybe people question or not understand about why church is church, a place where people can come and get a real message. Not that the other messages aren't real, but just delivered in maybe a little different way. We are really trying to use breakthrough as a vessel to spread the good news and for people to hear it's okay. It's okay that you struggle. It's okay that life is hard. It's okay that things happen. We can get through this together. The song that we sang in the beginning, the lyrics were, "Brother, let me be your shelter. I'll never leave you alone. I'll be the one you call." We are the church, friends. The church isn't actually a building. The church isn't a set of words on a piece of paper. The church isn't a banner or a sign or the donuts or the coffee. The church is us. If people want to feel like they have shelter, if they want to feel like they have grace and mercy and love, we have to give it. And the world knows, and God knows that we need it. Paul's point, when he first started writing the letter, he was talking about ministry. And what he was trying to get the people at Corinth to understand was that they are all ministers. You don't have to stand up and give a lesson or a sermon. You don't have to have robes and stoles. You don't have to go to college or university or seminary or have any type of training. Being a minister means if you are a person of any faith at all, that you will open yourself up and let God use you as a vessel of love. In spite of all the stuff that we've got going in our lives, because there isn't anybody perfect. My girls know it, my wife knows it. I am not the perfect husband and father. Even though we celebrate fathers on Father's Day, we make mistakes. Words come out of my mouth sometimes that probably shouldn't. I'm not always as patient as I should be. I'm not always as loving and as gracious as I should be. We all have so much in common. and God still chooses to use us to spread his love. That's what the world needs to hear. Making a difference in the name of Christ means making an investment in each other. I don't know if you saw, after the Charleston shootings, the shooter's first appearance in court. One of the family members from the church got up and said, "We forgive you. We pray that God forgives you as well." Somebody that just gunned down in cold blood their loved ones. And they made a decision and a choice to allow God's grace and God's love and God's mercy to shine through them. I can't think of a better example of what it means to be church. Didn't mean their hardship didn't happen. They were validating the reality of the world and choosing to let God's love step ahead of the violence and the anger and the hatred. That was Paul's message to the church of Corinth, and that's Paul's message and God's message to us. Thanks for being here at Breakthrough today. Hopefully we'll continue to spread messages like this week after week after week, because this is the good news. God wins in the end, always. This is the message that the world needs to hear. We're going to have a closing song. Sit, stand, do whatever feels comfortable.